So welcome to Powerless Penguins United Big Book Study. This week I'm pleased to reintroduce Mags, who's kindly come along to continue with the Big Book Study. Over to you, Mags. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lois, for your service. And to everybody in the background, my name is Mags and I'm an alcoholic. And it's great to be here this morning. I just want to say thank you for allowing me, enabling me to be of service every week. It's a very beautiful thing and I really appreciate it. So this morning we are, like Lois said, page 79. We're starting in that paragraph. The first line, usually, however, other people are involved. I had a little giggle to myself as I was listening to people talk before the meeting. And there was all sorts of little jokes going on here because it's Valentine's Day. You know, the usual, people can't get out of their door because they've had that many bouquets of flowers. You know, they were the type of things we were talking about before the meeting. I was giggling to myself because the in-law said, oh, the paragraph that we're starting from is usually, however, other people are involved. And I heard someone go, uh-oh. So it kind of gives me a little bit of an insight as to where people's minds may be about where we're going into in this particular part of the book. And I can understand that. But what I would say is that, I think you might know what I'm going to say is that, in order to have this new experience with God, you've got to set aside every single thing you think you know about what we're going to talk about today in relation to the fact that, there are other people involved. And the reality of it is that we have identified through our fourth and fifth step and into 6 and 7, and we've made this list of people in step 8. We now recognize the fact that 100% there are other people involved and to whom we have, perhaps caused harm in some way, shape or form. But let's keep willingness and, don't be opposed to in mind as per the definition of willingness to think that there might be something else that's going to get in so that we won't have that reaction going forward about the fact that other people are involved. There's always going to be other people involved in our lives. Of course there are. But our interaction with these people going forward changes as a result of the amends that we're going to make. Really and truly, I was thinking about it whilst I was making a cup of tea this morning that, gosh, the level of peace that one can get from simply having these conversations. And I don't underestimate the difficulty that some people have with this or the sense of nervousness that people may have about this, or this sense of, oh my goodness, I don't want to do this at all, or this avoidance of it. But the way that this is set out in the program, it is very clear-cut directions. It does keep us on track. They do provide such golden nuggets, as I call them, of information to really help us get through these conversations. And also the fact you're not doing this by yourself. You've got your sponsor, but most importantly, at the end of that, 7th step, you've asked for the power, strength, the God of your understanding, strength to be able to go out and do his bidding. So you're not doing this by yourself. Sometimes it might feel like that, but that's not the case. And in any given moment of the day, to remember you're not doing this by yourself in amends or otherwise is a very beautiful thing to call upon. And if you are disturbed, that 100% the peace is within you. At this point in the program, we know that the great reality is deep down within us. So I just smiled about that this morning. And it was a really good reminder for me that Yeah, it's easy for me to sit here and go through this book study every week, isn't it? Having had the experience of this. And thank you all for the reminder about, the importance of just keeping this alive and doing it in a way that is accessible to everybody, because that's the point of the big book, to give you access to this power, to be able to get you through these conversations, which you might be nervous about. And a little bit of nervousness isn't always a bad thing at all. So let's get into it. Usually, however, other people are involved. We've learned in the previous paragraph that, we're now going to any lengths for a spiritual experience, because the alcohol thing is moving on. We're nearly at our step 10. There's a few pages yet to go, but the alcohol thing, going to any lengths for victory over alcohol, we've been reminded of that twice before in the book. They're now giving us this other push, if you like, that we're now going to any lengths to find a spiritual experience, of which all of these conversations are spiritual experiences. So from the people in your 4th step inventory into those step 5 conversations, you've identified all of the lacks, the defects, the shortcomings, and the people that have been impacted. But here's the thing. This is a change in behavior. This is a personality change. This is the psychic change also. This next line. Although there are other people involved, therefore, we are not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. I mean, that's a completely different thought process from the one that I had before I went into this program of action and recovery. I've martyred myself. Oh, you don't know the type of life I have. If you had been brought up the way that I was brought up, you would have acted out the way that I acted out. It's not my fault that this has happened to me. Throwing all of my stuff, projecting all of my stuff onto other individuals to save my own skin. That's not what this is about. I can't be hasty. I can't be foolish. This is a very well thought through process that we're going through, where we're, contemplating and thinking about these conversations and what we are going to say to these individuals and what we're going to bring to it. My sponsor gave me a very straightforward way of preparing for these conversations. And I'll come on to that at some point. But we're not to be the hasty and foolish martyr. And we are not here to sacrifice other people to get what we want from these conversations, to get what we think we need from these conversations, to save us from this terrible life that we had. No, it's quite the opposite of that. I don't know why this is coming to my mind, but it is a very popular TV program based in Northern Ireland, up in the Northwest, 4 schoolgirls and a schoolboy. And the principal of the school is a nun, okay? And the children get caught doing something and they get brought into the principal's office. They go to see the nun. And the nun talks to, can't believe I'm talking about this, but it's a funny scene, makes me laugh every time I see it. So the nun approaches these 4 individuals and the guy, and all of the parents are in the room at that time. This is how serious the misdemeanor was in the school. And the nun speaks to one of the girls, her name is Claire, and says, well, Claire, can you give me an explanation of what has happened? And she simply turns around and says, it wasn't me, sister, it was Michelle. And at which point the nun says, Claire, I think we've all lost a little bit of respect for you at this point. Because basically what Claire did was threw Michelle under the bus. She acted as the foolish martyr. She was hasty in order to save her own skin. And it makes me laugh every time I watch that, because it's like, yeah, that's the type of thing you would have done. But I'm sure it wasn't me. I didn't do that. I didn't instigate it. It was him that did that. It was her that did that. That's not what this is about. It was because of her I did that. I reacted that way because of her. I took myself off because of him. No responsibility for our own actions. And that's where, again, our thought processes start to change by what this program has given us. So this one is related to circumstances, obviously, that many people will find themselves in. There's many of us that have had, different relationships, that have been married, that have been divorced, that have remarried. It's a common thing, nothing to be afraid of. But with that comes potential complications in how we move forward with life and how we continue to build those relations and keep relations in a good way. Can't think of any other word for it right now. But this is the example of where a man who has been remarried, because of resentment and drinking, he had not paid alimony to his first wife. She was furious. Of course she was. She went to court and got an order for his arrest. That's what you would have done back in the day. I can't really comment on it. The thing about it is that we must remember that these examples are for many years ago, but the general principles of what they're saying still apply to today's life. That's the reality of it. So these circumstances happened. Alcoholic addict didn't pay their alimony. The wife has taken the course of action that she saw appropriate. We're not happy with that. But here's the difference. This man, he had commenced our way of life. This program, the action that we're taking every day, this is now our way of life. Not acting as the hasty, foolish martyr. He had commenced our way of life. He's having a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps. That's his own recovery. He's being of service, practicing these principles in all of his affairs. He's sponsoring other individuals. Just like that, the three sides of that triangle. Unity, recovery, service. He's commenced our way of life. That's what we're talking about here. It's not just sitting in meetings and listening to people every day. He's actually taken the action that is required. Of course, in addition to the meetings that he's attending. But it's so important to understand that he's commenced our way of life, which is different to the way of life that he had before, as a result of living this way of life. Listen to what's happened. He's secured a position. He's got a job. And was getting his head above water. As a result of taking the action, his circumstances have changed. And therefore, the action that he can take to rectify this could potentially change. But there's a little caveat here. It would have been impressive heroics if he had have walked up to the judge and said, "Here I am." Of course it would have been. Acting the martyr. Here I am to save the day. That's not what this is about. Look at me. I'm a recovered alcoholic and I'm going to change the world. This egoic approach to things. No. We're going in a calm, frank manner, like it talks about. We're going to be open in our approach to this. We're going to have a sincere desire to right the wrong. All of the little instructions that have been given to us up to this point, this is where they all gather together to change the trajectory of the conversation that we're going to have. This next paragraph is, all of them are important, of course, but this one is important because it talks about the importance of willingness. Remember that this willingness is essential, indispensable for the rest of our lives. When we were in step 6, it talked about the fact, and into 7, that if we weren't ready for God to take all of us, we had to pray for the willingness. And throughout this step 9 process, there's a number of prayers of willingness. We ask for the willingness. We ask for the willingness. We know now that anywhere we ask, it's the prayer. And in this paragraph, it talks about the willingness on a couple of occasions. It's a big deal to go to your ex-partner having not paid what you should have paid and to be able to arrange the best course going forward. We learned about our creditors last week. We should not fear our creditors. We arrange the best deal possible. The same applies with this. Although it's not a creditor and it's a relationship with somebody who was in our lives at some point. But the general principles apply. We have to achieve the best outcome possible. So we thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary. Yeah, to go to the judge to say, I need to make arrangements here, if necessary. But if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for either family. So, through discussions with his sponsor, we suggested he write his first wife admitting his faults and asking for forgiveness. So in this occasion, it wasn't appropriate necessarily to see the individual directly. Might have been in a different location, who knows, back in the day. But there was a means to getting the information to this person to admit his faults, to let the other individual know, here's what I've established. This is where I was selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, whatever the case may be. And asking how they can make an amends. A few weeks ago I talked about that word forgiveness. I of myself as a human being don't have the power of God, as you know, to, anoint everybody and I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you, in the sense that it comes from a religious perspective, in the sense that it comes from, I have the power to forgive you and everything that you've done in your life, and equally for another person saying that to me. It might put some people off that word forgiveness because it can be linked to, a particular religious denomination in it. My religion that I was brought up in as a child, forgiveness was about repenting my sins to one person, receiving penance, going off to do that. And, God was a bad thing and I was going to be struck down and I would never be forgiven. So that word made me bristle with antagonism when I read it in the book. But the way that I see it now, through the grace of this power and setting aside every single thing I think I know, when I go into these conversations, I know I'm placing myself in the position to do God's work well. That's what it talks to us about in our step 3 promises. My little plans and designs no longer matter. Like it says in our fear inventory, I'm here in this world to play the role that he assigned. So with that mentality, which is different from the one that I had before, I'm going into these conversations to do this for God, to give it to God, because the outcome is not mine. I'm taking the spiritual action irrespective of the outcome. So I'm doing it for God, to be of maximum service to God and to the people around me, and I'm giving the outcome to him. Because the outcome doesn't matter. It does in the sense that it's going to be rectified, but I'm not caught up in trying to work it out. I hope that makes sense. So on the basis of writing and admitting his faults and asking for that forgiveness in this example, he did all of that and also sent a small amount of money, what he could afford at that time. He told her that he would try to do what he would try to do in the future. He said he was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. So willingness there again. He's not opposed to in mind that if this is what it's going to take for us to rectify the situation, for this relationship to be amended, he was prepared to go to jail. Of course, she did not want that, and the whole situation has long since been adjusted. This is an example of where, in those 9-step promises, when we get to them, conversations like this, you will be amazed before you're halfway through. Because the outcome that you believe is going to happen, if I admit this, oh my God, I'm going to go to jail, therefore I can't do this. You're still trying to control the outcome. You're still trying to control the conversation. You're still trying to get what you want. I don't want to go to jail, so therefore I'm not going to have this conversation with the person because they're going to drop me in it. Well, who says? That's all in your mind. That's all in your thinking. That prevents us from taking a step forward to make the amends, to make the change. Because here on page 80 at the top is another little instruction, another piece of guidance, so clear. Before taking drastic action, such as going to the judge or, thinking that you're going to go to jail, before taking any drastic action, which might implicate other people as well, we secure their consent. Again, we can't be the foolish martyr just to save our own skin. We have to consult with other people if there are other people involved, but not in a plotting and planning way, to simply inform the other individuals, this is what I've got to do. This is what I've got to do for my program of recovery. This is what I've got to do for my program of action. This is the course that I am going to take, and to assure the individual that we will not be including them within that amends, because if they wish to make an amends or to have it not have anything to do with it, that's their business, no longer yours. So you're taking the action only that you are required to take. If we've obtained permission, have consulted with others, be that your sponsor, and taken the guidance, here's the thing, this is different as well. We've asked God to help. This is the prayer. We're continuing to be in this prayerful exercise. Yes, we've asked permission of the other individual. I'm going to go and do this because this is the reason why. I'm going to any lengths for the spiritual experience. I'm going to any lengths for victory over alcohol. So please know that I'm doing this, and off we go. But we have to ask God to help us. We're going out to do his bidding. We're in this relationship with this power greater than ourselves. We're not doing this by ourselves. And once we do that, the drastic step is indicated. We must not shrink. We take one step forward and we go into this conversation. And there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of examples that we could all share potentially of the stories that we've heard of individuals that have stepped into those conversations, that have taken the drastic action or which seemed drastic to them at that time. And the outcome was amazing before they were even halfway through the rest of their amends. I love it when I get a call from someone who says, you'll never believe what happened. And I'm like, right, okay, share it. And I'm always sitting there going, I do believe it happened, because this is the way of living that we have. Isn't that amazing? And those promises start to come true all the way through. When we get to this point, people start to realize, God, my little plans and designs don't matter anymore, because I thought this conversation was going to end up with X, Y, and Z, and it was completely the opposite. And you can hear the excitement in their voice. And I just love to sit back and smile. Because this is the world that we live in, the fourth dimension of existence. This is where the miracles happen. It tells us later on in the book that the miracles are amongst us. And they really and truly are. And there's no order in the size of those miracles. It doesn't matter what the outcome is, whether you see it as a big amends or a little amends. The amends is the amends. It's all the same thing. It's still the same course of action. And when I hear people talk about their amends, it gives me more momentum to continue to want to do mine. That's the thing. So we're asking God to help us. Every single conversation we're going into, it's a prayer, and it's a prayerful exercise to prepare for these conversations too. Another little thing that's jumped into my mind in relation to, finding these people, that example of he wrote a letter for whatever reason. When I was doing my list of amends and making the list of people that I wanted to approach, I was like, I'm never going to find this person. I'm never going to find that person. My sponsor was like, well, that doesn't matter whether you think you're going to find them or not. Write them down. If you've an amends to make, write them down on your list and start prepping the conversation. And I'm thinking, yeah, whatever. I did what he told me, but I complained about it in my own head. You know, that sort of stuff. Had a little conversation with myself, complained and thought, whatever. And lo and behold, I'll never forget it. It was a Friday and I'd made the little list and there was 2 names on there. And I went to the little coffee shop at the top of my street, walked around the corner, banged into a person and was looking down at the time, and all I could see was this person's feet. I was paying attention to my phone. Saw this person's feet, banged into them and looked up, and there was the person whose name I had just wrote on the amends list the night before. Hadn't seen him for 6 years. The last person I wanted to be seeing on a Saturday morning. But there he was, amends to be made. On the very same day. Because I didn't want to go back to that coffee shop. I went to the other coffee shop, right? Because I didn't want to bump into this person again, because I knew already he's in the vicinity. I'll have to make an amends. So I went to the other coffee shop around the other corner, 10 minutes away. I thought I'm never going to bump into him there. And there, lo and behold, in this little courtyard was another person whose name I had just written on the list the night before. This person should have been living in London. I hadn't seen them for 12 years or so. Like, there's where my head was. He's sitting in the courtyard. He's on my amends list. You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be in London. I'm not supposed to find you. I'm not supposed to be making amends to you. And there they are, living round the corner from me. So don't be surprised if these little, I don't know what they even are, coincidences, serendipitous moments or whatever. Don't be surprised that this sort of stuff happens, because this is what does happen in the world of the spirit. This is what happens when you're rocketed to the 4th dimension of existence. Genuinely, it's the most amazing thing. Now, it did take me a little bit of time to build up the willingness to go and have these conversations with both these gentlemen, but it happened. And that's the beauty and the grace of this program. And I love to hear when people talk about stories like that. Anyway, I digress. Back into the pages. This is another example. So I think this is about the 5th example. Another, so we've done the man that we've hated, business acquaintances and friends, the first wife. So here's another example of where someone owes money. So this brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival. Yeah, all those ones. Bitterly hated rival, bitterly hated once friend, giving him no receipt for the money. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as a basis for discrediting the man. Does that ring any bells with you any time that you've done that? He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. Anything like that you may have done? I'm seeing people shake their head and saying, no, good for you, Pete. And then I'm seeing other people nodding, going, yeah. So it might not have taken the form that it's saying here, but think about the equivalent. Don't let your mind deceive you. Think about the equivalent. I destroyed my bitter rival at work. Maybe not use those words, but did I go out of my way to make sure that they didn't get the credit that they deserved because I deserved it more? Yeah, absolutely. Was it about money? No, it was not. It was about my pride. It was about my reputation. I wanted to take them down. So they were the type of amends that I needed to make. And this is where his thought process is. He felt that he had done a wrong he could not possibly make right. That might be where your thought process is. I can't have this conversation. There's no way they're going to say yes to me meeting them. There's no way that they're going to do X, Y, and Z. There's no way that they'll want to meet with me. There's no way. And what happens if they say this and Stop. Nothing to do with you. All you've got to do is take the action. Because in his mindset, if he opened the old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. You see where this build-up happens? this catastrophization, if even that's a word, in our mind, that this tiny, tiny little thing becomes this huge snowball coming down the side of a mountain, and then there's an avalanche, and all we have to do is have a conversation, a real simple conversation of, this is where I'm at, this is what happened, can we talk about it? What right had he to involve those dependent upon him? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? How could I possibly go to my work colleagues and say, do you know what? That was my fault. How could I possibly? It goes on to tell us, after consulting with his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion that it was better to take these risks than to stand before his creator guilty of such ruinous slander. That language is really, really strong, isn't it? It seems really, really direct. It seems like really something from, well, I don't really know. It just reminds me of a particular denomination of, oh, you're going to stand up and you're going to be ruined and you're going to have to stand before God or else you're not going to get to heaven, rah, rah, rah. That type of thing, I have to set aside all of that language in order to have a new experience with the God of my understanding. That's what this comes down to, you know. After consulting with my sponsor, after speaking with my boss, I came to the conclusion that it was better for me to meet my colleagues individually and talk to them about where I'm at, to talk to them about my behaviour, to talk to them about the reasons why I was the way that I was. And whatever the outcome was going to be, it was going to be. That took willingness and it took prayer. Because this next line, as they say, it's a pure and utter belter of a line. If you do underline, if you do mark your book, if you asterisk, if you highlight, whatever, do not let this one fade. As we go into these conversations, he saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again. And all would be lost anyhow. And that applies in relationships, that applies in work, that applies in any single solitary thing in our life. There is no differentiation as to what this applies to. We have to place the outcome in God's hands, or we will return to drink. Like it says on page 66, to drink is to die. We're going to any lengths for a spiritual experience. And remember, when we place our hands in the hands of God, he has a better plan than we could ever have planned, and that you will have experienced by this point in the program with your sponsor, because there's many people that will have been trying to do this recovery thing their way and it hasn't worked. And when you do it this way, it works remarkably well, where you gain full-blown recovery. And that's it. Not relief from alcohol, not relief from, these people for a little while, full-blown recovery. And that's what this is all about. And as a result of him placing the outcome in God's hands, he attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. His action met with widespread approval. And today he is one of the most trusted citizens of his time. This all happened years ago. This is an example of where what we think is going to happen, the disaster that we think is going to happen, quite the opposite happens. I've seen an example of this actually take place in my home group on a number of occasions. A home group is a place where there's many, many fractions. And thank God we have the 12 traditions to keep us protected from ourselves. But I've seen in my home group, in whatever way, shape or form it's taken place, whether that's a group conscience or even at a meeting, where an amends has had to be made by a member to the group, where they've had to stand up or they've had to say in the group conscience or take time within a meeting, I was behaved in a manner that was not appropriate. I've taken it to my inventory. Here's where I'm at, and I would like to make amends. I've seen it numerous times. So that's a perfect example from the book as to how these spiritual principles can be applied. We have to. I can't emphasize this enough. Honestly, the book can't emphasize it enough. I love that line. He saw he had to place the outcome in God's hands. You know, even in life at this moment in time, I've got a lot of stuff going on. Everybody has a lot of stuff going on. But you know what? See, within me, I have got so much peace about everything. Everything. Because what I've been taught by you guys and what this way of living gives me is to tap into that resource inside me that's no longer unsuspected. It's totally and utterly there. And no matter what is going on, I, from the outset, from all of this stuff starting, have 100% made a decision to place all of it in God's hands. And I just carry on with my day. And I know that sounds really simple, but that's just what I do. And yet I'm talking to friends and they're wrangling with things and, you know, wrestling satisfaction if they could only manage in this world. And I'm just like, okay, well, you keep on doing that. You keep on doing that, because that's not the space that I live, you know. And thank you for reminding me that that's not the space in which I live. And what I have to do every single day with everything is place it in God's hands. I'm not just handing it over to him and letting him sort it all out. There's still the action that I need to take through the day. I still have to practice my step 10, 11 and 12. That's where the golden nuggets come. I'm not saying, here, God, here's all my problems, leave them with you and sit and contemplate my navel for the next 4 months. You know, that's not what this is about. I still action. Anyway, I hope that made some sense. We'll go into this next paragraph. Oh, you might start making little noises and twitching in your seat when we start reading this one as well. There might be that little caveat going, uh-oh, you know, here we go. Yeah, we're going to talk about the domestic troubles, people. Anybody had any of those? Those little domestic troubles? Love a domestic trouble, me. Love hearing them all. Love telling people about mine. Yeah, so the chances are that we have domestic troubles. We're not just talking about the cleaning, by the way, you know, domestic science and cleaning up our kitchen and stuff. We're talking about real troubles. We're talking about relationships, because the reality of it is the primary fact, Bill W. talks about this in the 12 and 12. I love this little quote, that the primary fact that we alcoholics fail to realize is our total inability to form a true partnership with another human being. Let that one sit for a little bit. And what this amends process does, what this beautiful, beautiful process does, is it totally and utterly brings the power into these conversations where we are given 100% the most amazing ability to form true partnerships with people like never before. And what it also does is enables us to move on from those partnerships that are serving us no purpose. To move on from those partnerships that have caused each other harm. And that it's not coming from a place of judgment, opinion, control, manipulation, like it would have been previously. That it's coming from a place that is guided, protected, directed, and strengthened by the power that is greater than us. That's what this is about. So even the most difficult, complicated domestic troubles can be and have been eradicated. That's what this is all about. And we start to see things from an entirely different angle. Even the relationship that we have with ourselves becomes different. So the chances are we have domestic troubles. Perhaps we're mixed up with women, men, whatever, people, in a fashion we couldn't care to have advertised. We doubt it in this respect. Alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. Alcoholics, addicts, in many ways, we're just human beings. You know, people that don't have our allergy or mental obsession get up to these things as well. You know, it doesn't make us unique and exceptional from that perspective. But the truth of the matter is, our drinking does complicate sex relationships in the home. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful and uncommunicative. Of course she does. Of course he does. Of course they do. I couldn't have put up with me. Yet my partner put up with me beyond a reasonable amount of time for whatever reason. That's what it's saying here. How could she be anything else? How could she be unresentful and communicating all the time when I have treated my partner as if, well, I'm not even going to go into it. Sit with your own stuff. Sit with what you've identified within your inventories. That's what your truth is. You're looking at this other person from an entirely different angle now. You can see, hopefully, clearly, with complete and utter clarity, wow, it was never about them. It was about me. It was about my reaction to life. It was about everything that I was projecting onto them. When we get really willing, honest, and open-minded with ourselves. Because what I've established, what I've learned, what I've come to believe, and this is the most beautiful thing in my life ever, honestly, it's never, ever, ever about the other person. And it's taken me time to understand that, but to truly see life from a different angle. It's never about the person that's standing in front of me. It's about what's going on inside me. And for too many years, I projected everything onto somebody else. So, as a result of the lack of communication, wife is worn out, is resentful, the husband begins to feel lonely, sorry for himself. Do you remember all of those times? Oh my God, I don't feel loved. They're not paying any attention to me. As a result, he commences to look around in the nightclubs or their equivalent for something besides liquor. Perhaps he is having a secret and exciting affair with the girl who understands. He really gets me. He really gets me. He understands. He knows what it's like to live like me. He knows what it's like to have this drink problem. He knows what it's like to have this drug problem whilst we're sitting having the drink and the drugs. He really understands me. He knows what this is all about. Like in my head, I'm laughing at it, like the audacity, the madness, the insanity of it all. He really understands me. God, horrific. In fairness, we must say that she may understand, but what are we going to do about a thing like that? A man so involved often feels very remorseful at times, especially if he is married to a loyal and courageous girl who has literally gone through hell for him. That's what's happened in our lives. People have stood by us. People have given all of themselves to us, to support us, to help us, to get us out of the darkness, to get us away from all of the madness and the insanity. They're exhausted with this stuff. At the same time, we're exhausted with all of this stuff because we're battling of our own will to try and rectify it, as opposed to starting a program of action that solves all our problems, you know? So there's two parallel things going on at the same time, never the two shall meet. But here's the thing, whatever the situation, couldn't be clearer. We usually have to do something about it. I have to do something about it. I can't make the other person change. I can't get them to be how I want them to be. I can't get them to think the way that I want them to think. I can only do what I can do. If we are sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? Not always, we think. If she knows in a general way that we have been wild, should we tell her in detail? Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. She will want to know who the woman is and where she is. We feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. No right to involve another person. We are not the foolish, hasty martyr. What I am there in this conversation to do with my partner is to say, I know that you're aware that I have not been faithful. I am not going into the particulars. I'm here to talk to you about that and many other things about how I was in this relationship and ultimately how I can make amends. I am not going into all of the detail. If they ask the question about it, I am not going into all of the detail. It might not be appropriate. We are sorry for what we have done, and God willing, it should not be repeated. Because the reality of it is, if I have done what is suggested back in the inventory process, I have created my sex ID. And in my sex ID, I do not want to be having affairs. I want to be faithful. I want to stay true to my partner. I want to be honest. I want to be loyal. I want to be. I am, all of those things as I move into this new way of living. So God willing, through that process of inventory, through that prayerful exercise that continues for our lifetime, it shall not be repeated. More than that, we cannot do. We have no right to go further. We cannot drop anybody else in it to save our own skin, is the point here. Though there may be justifiable exceptions, and though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we have often found this the best course to take. So, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to sex relations, when it comes to all of that, everybody has a story. Everybody has a unique and exceptional circumstance, judgment, opinions, whatever it might be. We are not the arbiter of anybody's sex conduct. Remember that way back in the 4th step. We are not. Right? The point of this is you've got your sponsor. You talk the circumstances. You discuss the course of action. Is it right to say everything? Do they need to know everything? Do they not need to know everything? This is not about lying. This is not about covering up what happened. It's about how the conversation takes place to ensure that no harm is caused going forward to anybody related to the circumstances. These are very general principles that should be applied. I am not telling people what to do with the marital affairs or what they got up to with whatever activity outside of their marriage. I don't care. I've heard it all before. And if you think you're sitting in front of your sponsor to be embarrassed about talking about this, don't. We've heard it all before and more. Nothing will or should shock us. That's the reality of this. But the point for us is that God willing, this will not be repeated. Up to this point, we will have done a lot of work to ensure that it won't be repeated. And we go to this in a calm, frank, open manner, a sincere desire to right the wrong, genuine and authentic in what we're wishing to say. And we listen. And we move from there. Our design for living is not a one-way street. This is where they bring then the other person in. It's not a one-way street. We have to keep our side of the street clean. There is no doubt about it. It is as good for the wife as for the husband. If we can forget, so can she. And it is better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy. So when I sat with my partner and we talked about all of that domestic troubles, I did not name people. My relationship ended. It was already ended, if I'm honest. But what the point being is that as things move on, as things are mended, as things are amended, if the relationship continues, it can't be that the past is dragged up again and again and again. If you make that amends, your partner must move on as well. This way of living, this design for living works on both parts, okay? And it's more of this comes out in the family afterwards and the chapter to the wives and all of that. Very clear-cut directions and instructions as to how to do this. But when we make this amends, we don't regret the past. We don't wish to shut the door on it. But we grow in a willingness and honesty and open-mindedness that this relation continues to move forward. My part in all of this is that my sex ideal is in the appropriate place where I do not repeat the behaviours and attitudes of the past. And I go back to that point from Bill W. All of our lives, in the progression of our illness, in the progression of our addiction, we had, the fact of the matter is we were not able at all to form true partnerships with people. And what this does now is enables us to form real, true partnerships and relationships with any human being on this planet, no matter who they are. That's the beauty. That's the power of recovery. That's the beauty and the power of the God greater than you. The power that is greater than you, that is running in and through you every single moment of the day. If we choose to call upon it. If we choose to ask for God's help. And if there's anything from today's session, place the outcome in God's hands, no matter what the situation. And I'll leave it at that.